Hey guys, welcome back to the Gray Matter Health Podcast. So I know it's been a while since my last episode, and really I have no excuses except I had a really good idea for this episode, and it took me quite a while to just figure out how to structure it so it would make the most sense. And I'm still not really sure about this approach, so I apologize in advance if it seems to meander from place to place, but I promise you, if you stick it through to the end, I'm going to tie everything back to what the podcast is all about, which is personal development and improving your health. So with that said, I really want to speak today to the ambitious, high achiever, career-oriented type of person. You know who you are. I know that I personally identify under that category, so this is something that's really near and dear to me, especially as I kind of reflect on my own life and my own trajectory. The question I had in mind, which is the title of the video, is you're really good at getting things done, but you don't know why you do them. And this is kind of a surprisingly common problem, even though it sounds really stupid on the surface. Because, yeah, if you're really good at what you do, then why wouldn't what you do be exactly what you want to do? I mean, you're good at it, you've invested time, you've chosen to get better. So, why would that be any different than what you truly want and what your purpose is in life? Kind of a tricky question, right? But what I notice a lot with a lot of the high achieving, high performing, go getter type of people who are really good at strategizing and systematizing in the real world is that a very common experience is that the very same people will take a step back and kind of feel just the slightest bit of misalignment with their internal compass. Like they'll feel really proud of their accomplishments, but then once they have a chance to kind of like take a breather and really reflect and really deeply reflect on what they're doing and where they're headed, there is a little bit of blindness there. There's a little bit of confusion. And I know this isn't the case for everyone. Of course, some people are just very aligned, know exactly what they're doing, feel 100% confident in it. But I just want to still talk about this pattern that I think happens quite a lot that isn't talked about as much as it should be. So, just to kind of motivate how this came up, is as you all know from our previous conversations, I left my tech job, my corporate tech job in New York City about 4 years ago now, and pursued this new track becoming a health coach. And as in the process of that, I moved all the way out from the city back to suburban Colorado, about an hour out from Denver. So, one of the things, the big culture shocks that I've had to adjust to is finding my own people here. And something that I've done in order to meet like minded people is try joining these social dinner clubs that they have in Denver. So for me, I have to drive all the way out to the city, but it's worth it just because there is a higher concentration of working professionals around my age who kind of care about the same things. So, about 2 or 3 times a month, I've been attending these dinners where it's kind of a random group, maybe 6 to 8 people. We sit down and there's a specific topic at the dinner table, whether it be about philosophy or psychology or current events or tech. They always provide a certain topic for us to kind of dig into, and there are always little parts of that topic, at least, that relate back to people's personal lives, people's personal views, so we can connect to each other as human beings because we all know we're lacking that human connection. So I think these dinner groups are meant to solve for that problem. Anyway, long story short, the club that I've most recently been a part of, it has quite a bit of a steep membership fee, so about $100 a month just to have the privilege of being able to sign up for the events. And they're always at kind of fancier restaurants, a little bit higher end, so one meal itself would be another $100. The reason why I decided to sign up is because I figured, okay, there's this barrier to entry, so people who are really invested in getting to meet other people. They're kind of putting some money on it, like they are making a financial investment, so they're more likely to kind of like show up, be present, and participate because they have some skin in the game. But another element to this is the people who it's most accessible to are very wealthy people. Um, and I don't want to say that's everyone, but the typical profile of people I've been meeting in these dinners is very similar to people I would have met in my former life in corporate. So, definitely a lot of business people, entrepreneurs, corporate ladder climbing, leaders, executives, that whole profile. People who have a lot of money but don't have a lot of social time and want to optimize the time they have to make some good connections. Nothing wrong with that. So, as I've been thrown back into this world of talking to people who really prioritize their work, really prioritize their financial earnings and that whole side of things, it's brought me back to an environment that I used to be a part of when I worked in tech. And I realize it's this environment where career kind of trumps everything else. And career kind of becomes such an important part of your identity that it's almost like the primary way that people feel good about themselves is, okay, I'm really, really invested, spending a lot of time at work. My brain's always thinking about what projects I'm doing, how I'm getting promoted, how I'm going to meet the next goal, have the next big accomplishment, and all of that to succeed in their career in and of itself, but also to validate their self-worth. So knowing that that's the case, kind of being around these people has reminded me of that mindset. And it's a mindset that I used to absolutely 100% subscribe to myself when I was younger. Um, Not saying that there's anything good or bad about it, but I've noticed certain patterns or at least certain themes in some of these people and the conversations we're having and how they view life. Um, so that's one side of things, just to provide some context. And I promise I'll kind of like tie it all back together in the end. But the other side is one of my very close friends has gotten really deep into personality theory, analyzing people's personalities, how they're different, all the different types of typology to describe different dimensions and axes of how people are, how they act, what's important to them. And I've had a lot of interesting conversations with him about personality dynamics. And this sort of goes into why I started thinking about this subject in the first place is looking into my own personality through the lens of something called cognitive functions. This is a really, really old theory created by Carl Jung in, I think, the 1920s or long time ago, at least 100 years ago. It's this theory that there are eight main cognitive functions, and we each have a primary or preferred function that has come most naturally to us. Without getting into it too deep, us humans, we are all a little bit different, but there are kind of some rough ways to categorize people in terms of what naturally comes easily to them, what they're good at, what their strengths are. And I would consider like someone's primary cognitive function to be almost like a natural strength, something that they've had as a part of them ever since childhood that's come easily. Like some of us are really, really great at making friends, like helping people get along on the playground. Some of us are like really creative. Some of us like notice a lot of patterns in the world around us. Everyone has kind of a different strength. But as I looked into myself, I noticed that my own primary cognitive function is something called extroverted thinking. And I think people who are very successful in traditional careers, especially in leadership and organizing others, have this strength. For the most part, they're really good at something called extroverted thinking. And I'm just going to pull up like a quick description so I don't say anything too interpretive from my own perspective. Let's see. Okay, so here's a quick definition of the function extroverted thinking, which is going to be abbreviated as the letters TE. So if I say TE, it's going to mean extroverted thinking. So TE is the function that helps you strategize, organize, manage systems, and get things done. It's what lets you break down a goal and hit every milestone efficiently. It's part of you that says, here's the plan, here's the timeline, and here's how we'll do it. If you work in tech or corporate leadership or any high performance field, extroverted thinking is highly rewarded in that context. It's the function that gets reinforced over and over for promotions for hitting targets, praise for being decisive and organized, and recognition for building and executing systems well. So, in my own interpretation, people who are good at extroverted thinking are good at taking a look at the complexity around them in the world, really good at navigating like complexity and chaos, bringing people and functions together, and being able to analyze and strategize and organize in order to achieve any goal. So for me, I feel like this was a really core strength of mine because one of my earliest memories is actually being a child on the playground with my friends. I would try to organize like these sandcastle building competitions. I would try to organize like role play types of scenarios. I would kind of use my own imagination as well as what I could pick up from what other people enjoyed and also the physical tools and physical environment around us, bring all that together and like create an experience. That's kind of what I interpreted as growing up in childhood, an indication that I had this function. But I noticed that something that I have in common with other people who've been in important leadership roles, who have had to organize projects and people in the real world, is that it tends to be people who have nurtured this as a strength and who have almost always like grown up with that as a strength. So that is called extroverted thinking. Now, another part of this theory is that every cognitive function has an opposing function, like kind of an opposite. So if you are very strong at one function, you tend to be kind of weak at its opposite, or it tends to be kind of like an inferior or a blind spot for you. So if we flip those two words, extroverted thinking, what we get is something called introverted feeling. So now let me read out what that is. So introverted feeling, or FI, is the opposite of TE. It is your internal compass. It is quiet, reflective, asks questions such as, does this feel right to me? Is this aligned with who I am? Do I actually care about this? FI is about values, integrity, and emotional authenticity. And if you've spent your life leading with TE, there's a good chance that FI has been your blind spot. So, this opposite to extroverted thinking, introverted feeling, that's all about not looking at the external environment, but then redirecting and introspecting inside yourself to know how you feel about something. It's about integrity, moral alignment. It's about just personal alignment with what you're doing. You can see what's going on a little bit here is if you're someone who's always focused on making things happen externally, then you're not spending a ton of time maybe just being on your own, reflecting about how you feel, especially that word too, feelings, evoking like your internal emotions about something rather than just looking at like the external logic of how things go. So the reason I bring this up is I feel like this personality theory, especially like this strength or this cognitive function, I feel like this theory has drawn a ton of parallels to my experiences with people, real people who I've met in the real world and their struggles. I have known so many people who are absolutely amazing, very accomplished at their jobs. But something that people have in common is kind of like this minor existential crisis, just kind of like faintly speaking to them in the background, but something they're able to kind of push aside and ignore most of the time. But when I talk to a lot of like super successful, career driven people, the main concern that I hear underneath maybe like the first thing, like the first surface level things they tell me, like health and relationships and all of that, the driving factor of all of it is, man, like I am lacking I'm lacking this complete dedication and focus. I'm lacking this sense that I have a purpose, a deeper purpose for living, even though I've accomplished all these fantastic things, even though there's so many people who look up to me, I just I don't feel 100% authentic to myself that I'm doing something that I really want. And it goes back to our first conversation about authenticity and why it's so hard to be authentic in this world. But I think, just a theory of mine, the people who struggle with this the most often tend to be the people who are also most externally successful because they've poured so much energy into what's happening and what they're building. And they're constantly thinking about what is the next thing I need to contribute to this project to make it a success? What is the next thing I need to say to my colleague? What's the next thing that I need to do? And not enough about, well, how do I feel? How am I doing? That reflective aspect just isn't a big focus for them. So, okay, maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't, but the next question that comes up is, why is it even important? And that's something that also is neglected a lot. Is I feel like people who are in these positions don't necessarily think that it's a problem. And again, I kind of use those words just in passing, feeling and thinking. But people who are thinkers, they really value thinking, and it's very hard for them to value feelings. What happens is eventually life will show you that it is important. And what I mean by that is eventually you'll keep hitting milestones, you'll keep having these achievements, but something is going to trigger a feeling inside you that then starts questioning, what have I done? Why have I done it? Why is this important to me? Why do I care about this? And then those questions might be really faint at first. They might be really easy to push aside at first because, okay, yeah, of course, we have a logical explanation. Like, I did something that brought me a lot of external validation from my peers. It brought me financial stability for my family. It brought me a sense of success and accomplishment. Yes, very valid. But there's something a little bit deeper. And that voice is just going to keep getting louder and louder and louder until you actually attend to it. Like, yes, I did all these things, but why? Is it aligned to what I want to do? Is it really giving me a sense of deep fulfillment? Or could I apply my energy differently? Could I maybe think of something that would be even more fulfilling and more connected, make me feel more complete as a person? Once they start coming, like once they start repeating enough times, it will become a thing where your accomplishments, if it isn't what you really want to be doing, they're going to just start feeling empty and you're going to be left with this sense of why? What does it all mean? That's what happens when you just neglect that inner compass for too long. Another connection I want to draw with this all is a connection to another topic I've talked about in the past, which is the cultural experience of growing up in a family that immigrated to the US. Especially, I think, Asian American immigrants. If you're second generation like me, your parents came from another country where they're kind of struggling for material resources. I think that it is probably very likely that even if naturally extroverted thinking or TE wasn't your preferred function, it was something that you felt a lot of pressure to develop. Because when we come from a mindset of our parents being growing up in poverty, then given all these opportunities to succeed, they will definitely kind of impress upon you this external vision of success and make it seem like a very important thing, which I mean, they have a complete right to do because that is their lived experience. But at least from my personal experience, a lot of people I know, a lot of my friends who are second generation Asian Americans, as well as myself, we grew up with this focus of external accomplishment, right? Excel in your academics, excel in extracurriculars. It's really important for you to get a well-paying job. Parents pushed us toward that path, and every child, wanting to make their family proud is going to try to follow that path. So I see a lot of people also from this background who are more predisposed to having that strength in extroverted thinking and that gap in introverted feeling. And why does this even matter aside from, those like teeny tiny, like existential crisis whispers that I talked about before? I think maybe an even more compelling reason, which is what I probably should have mentioned first, is that your strength in thinking and strategizing is going to be really, really beneficial in the career realm of your life, but not as beneficial in the relationship realm of your life. And I think in general, what happens is in order to succeed in your career, you have to really lean into your strengths, make your strengths as strong as possible, and that's what's going to lead to success in that domain. But when we're talking about a different domain of life, the social domain, which is also very important to our health, in order to form very strong, deep relationships with people, we also have to work on our personal weaknesses. And that's especially the case if your weakness has to do with emotion or feeling. So I find that a lot of people, even people I talk to in my dinner groups, they're in their 40s and they're very happy with their lives all around, have kind of had the opportunities to do everything they want to do, build everything they want to build, success beyond their wildest dreams. But the one element that's missing is a partner. Surprisingly, a lot of these people, despite their wealth, despite their accomplishments, are single or they're struggling in their primary romantic relationship. Not to say that that's a hard and fast rule by any means, but I'm just noticing this as a trend where, again, people who invest a ton of their time and energy and focus into achieving things at work, there's not a whole lot of that left to work on other skills that are more important to relationship building. These are skills like active listening, like empathy, like feeling making your partner feel seen and heard and understood and having true emotional intimacy. That's going to be a challenge to someone who's used to kind of strategizing in the business sense. It's kind of going to be a diametric opposite to that. So, in order to form, if it's important to you, healthy relationships with family, even with close friends, a lack of awareness of feelings and emotional attunement is really going to have you suffer in that realm. People might think, again, using that word think, if you're in your thinking and your logic a lot, it's not that important to them because the most important thing is themselves, like their own accomplishments, their own lives. Like in a very logical world, it's also kind of a very self centered world of like, what can I get? What can I accomplish? You might not see these more subtle, soft relationship skills as that important. But the reality is, even if you aren't acknowledging their importance, under the surface, they are affecting your health. We as human beings are meant to have strong social relationships. We've evolved that way. So if that part is missing, even though you're mentally strong, even though you kind of deny and neglect and you can still power through, it's eventually maybe not going to be the most healthy thing for you because social health is such an important part of our health as well. So that's where the blind spot comes in. You become very accomplished, but you become internally very lonely, internally disconnected with kind of like your true identity, your greater purpose. And eventually, as you get older, these things will become more and more apparent. They'll start to affect your physical and mental health, even if you don't know it's happening. With all that said, I don't want to discount your accomplishments as someone with strong TE. And I don't want to say that I personally regret anything that I've done when I leaned into that aspect of myself either. I think people who are really strong TE users, they're very rare. That's such a rare strength and it can have such a huge impact. So you should absolutely be proud of that. Like, I love that I did all of those things, that I was able to accomplish those things, that I'm able to have insights that other people aren't necessarily able to have. And I'm able to have the dedication and the diligence to actually carry through and make sure my goals and my visions are met. I think that is an absolute superpower. So I'm not saying anything to discount it. All I'm saying is as we grow, as we mature, as we develop as individuals, what we need to see is kind of the value of being more well rounded and the value of actually acknowledging places where we're weak and places where we don't pay enough attention. So we don't end up spending our lives running really fast in the wrong direction. And that's something that I wish more people like me especially, heard in their younger years. So that's the reason why I'm sharing that with you all today. Now, I don't know if I've convinced any of you that you need to work on getting in touch with your internal feelings, but if that is something that you are interested in, I do have a couple of starting points to suggest for that. The first is an exercise that I find has been very valuable to some of my clients is identifying their own internal values. Now, you probably know, at least from a logical standpoint, like you've reasoned about what your values are and what are important to you, if you are someone who strategizes about their life and what they're going to accomplish. But the values I'm talking about are the ones that are like so innate and emotional that it didn't come through rationalization. It just came as a kind of side effect of who you are. And the way to discover these that I've found the most success in is just journaling or remembering every single time in recent history you got very, very angry. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if you can think of a time where you were absolutely raging, you were pissed off about something, like something just deeply offended every cell in your body, that I think is an excellent indicator of a values violation. So, for instance, if you got really mad, like disproportionately mad about, maybe not being told about something that your colleagues or your friends were told about, maybe getting left out of the group, then it could be that you have a value of belonging. If you had a coworker who took credit for something that wasn't theirs or said that they finished something that they didn't actually do and that made you really angry, one of your values could be honesty. But regardless, kind of identifying your top 3 to 5 values based on things that make you really angry, that can be a really good starting point to figuring out what your internal compass is, like where you want to go, what's important to you. The second is just asking yourself more frequently, how do I feel about this? And that is a lot harder done than you might expect. If you are actually a very logical person like myself, a lot of the times I find when someone asks me how I feel, my initial response will be justification. It's like not a feeling, but I respond with, oh, this thing happened to me, or this is what I think. I'll go more into like the thought process than I will the feeling. It's really hard to just sit with yourself and honestly introspect and evaluate, like, what is the emotion that I'm feeling without any judgment, without any consequence, without trying to strategize it away. Just recognizing, acknowledging, and actually feeling the feeling. The more practice you have at that, the more awareness you'll have about yourself, how you're reacting to things, but also the more understanding and empathy you'll have for everyone else in your life in terms of how they're feeling, because emotions are very important signals and signs to us about who we are and what we actually need. Now, I I hope that made sense. I hope I didn't jump around too much, but those are just some ideas that I've been mulling around that I just really wanted to share because it's something I definitely would have loved to know when I was younger. I'm very glad that I started out with strong extroverted thinking myself. But in recent years, it's been absolutely my new priority to develop my sense of introverted feeling, and it's been absolutely 100% worth it. So, hope that leaves you in a good spot. Hope you learned something today. If you have any feedback, please let me know in the comments or shoot me an email, michelle@graymatter.health. Catch you next time.